There's a ridiculous amount of special editions in Imprezas, but two stand out. 22Bs start at 200k, but this, the P1, is about a quarter of the price, and arguably, for UK roads, it's the better car. At 40k, this is also roughly the same price as a brand new Yaris GR. In this video, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you should buy this over the Yaris. The Yaris is a great effort for a modern car, but it just doesn't have the heritage that makes this so special. The P1 is based on the Japanese market only Type R. That was lightened, it had a tougher close ratio gearbox and intercooler water spray, so it was the perfect basis for the rally cars. In addition, this has a Peter Stevens styled body kit, it has suspension tuned specifically for UK roads, and ProDrive up the power to 280 HP through ECU and exhaust mods. It is also one of the few Imprezas to have ABS, which ProDrive deemed necessary for the UK market. The only downside to that is that you lose the adjustable centre diff that the other cars had. An upside is that this comes with the optional ProDrive front brake setup. The one thing that you could criticise about these cars is that maybe the braking was a little bit weak. This should really help. It also has an engine built by Engine Tuner for 375 horsepower. Let's see how it feels. Right, let's get the least impressive thing out of the way first. The interior. Well, it is pretty much standard Impreza. It was improved throughout the lifespan that these ran from up until the 2000s, 2001 I think this came out, but ultimately it's still a lot of cheap plastics. It's not particularly interesting, but in a way that gives you even more, it focuses you more on what this car is all about, which is the driving. Now, I believe that the Type R actually came with the standard sort of saloon seats because they knew that the rally people would just take them, junk them and put some proper seats in. So obviously this has ProDrive branded seats. I don't know if they're specific to this car, but they hold you in place really, really well. It's a mixture of fabric and Alcantara. Now, another interesting fact is that this has, with its extra power, so 375, has the same power to weight ratio as a Taycan Turbo, so 290 horsepower per ton. And that's incredible when you consider the Taycan has double the power, but it also has an extra 1,000 kilos. Now let's see how it feels going down the road. Well, that engine really is strong and it spins up so quickly the last few revs. The limiter comes in at just over 7, I think, from what I've been able to see. The power delivery is definitely the old-fashioned big turbo thing. You have to keep it at 3.5, but from there, it starts to pull really, really hard. The Subaru Flat 4 as well is such a distinctive engine. It just, the way it goes, the way it sounds, it's so glorious. It's no nonsense. It's quite a smooth engine, but it's a little bit lumpy low down, at least in this tune. The steering is incredibly communicative whilst being light. It's an incredible thing to monster roads like this. One thing I would say, it's probably not the sharpest setup in terms of steering, but wow, you can really cover ground quickly in this thing. It really requires some effort to get the most out of it. So A Yaris, for example, would be much more forgiving, and I think, well, it's a superior chassis setup in some ways, in that way, anyhow. But with this, if you go into a corner too fast, it will just understeer. If you don't plant your foot early enough in the bend, you don't get that lovely sort of four-wheel scrabbling, slingshotting you out of the bend. So you do have to concentrate, but that concentration, I think, is all part of what makes the experience so interactive. And it's really one of the big ways where this is, to me, far better than a Yaris. The steering as well on the Yaris, I find a little bit lacking. Wow, this thing moves. So definitely less front end grip than I was expecting. You can't just throw it in and hope you're going to get away with it. That gear change is lovely. It's really short throw, stumpy, quick changes. You feel connected to this car. Now these are supposed to be more forgiving on UK roads than the 22B, for example, but I have to say, this is still a stiffly set up car. Alan, who owns it, has changed the shocks, but he's done a like for like, so they should be pretty much the same spec as before. And they did a good job of controlling it. I mean, it feels like an expensive setup, but it is firm. I think part of what makes it feel so special is that you have to use the power and you have to use the throttle as part of driving it quickly. There's no way you can just rely on the steering. As I said, if you go in too fast, the front end doesn't feel like it's pinned down by all means. You have to go in a little bit slow, but then pin the throttle as early in the corner as you can. And it just scrabbles for grip and just sort of shoots out of the corner. It's very addictive. Very quick. In first gear, I just find it so difficult not to hit the limiter because it's so short, the gear, but also the engine spins up so quickly. The brakes have gone from feeling a little bit weak with not as that much feel on a standard car, and this, you have a really lovely, firm, progressive pedal with what feels like loads of stopping power. The roads are so greasy now that you couldn't really test them to the limit anyway, but they are a real improvement on other Imprezas that I've driven. Look, it feels more special. It's more interactive to drive. So really, that's all you should need to know to pick between this and a GR. But what if I was to tell you that financially as well, it could turn out to be cheaper to get one of these than to get the Yaris? So the starting price for a P1 is about 40,000. So for 45 anyway, that's the same as a new GR. The thing is, this won't depreciate. If anything, it should appreciate. They only made 1,000 of them. They're all numbered, a little plaque there. And also you could do classic insurance. So in the long run, could turn out to be cheaper to get one of these. Of course, if you're using a Yaris as a daily and so on, and you had to use this as a daily as well, I wouldn't want to do that. But that is a little bit food for thought. If you're just buying a car for fun, it might make more sense. Even if you're buying a second-hand Yaris, what's that going to be, 30, 35? They will depreciate. I don't think they're going to hold off at those values forever. So this might make a smarter buy. But at the end of the day, the cost considerations shouldn't be what you need to use to make up your mind. I mean, the Yaris is, I think, a great little car for something that was made in our modern era, but it has some limitations that are related to that. So of course, they've had to go for a sort of relatively efficient 3-cylinder engine. Now that just sounds to me, the way it goes, there's nothing wrong with the power that it produces, but it just sounds quite synthetic. The steering feel as well isn't quite what you'd want from a car like that. I mean, technically it's really accomplished, but personally, me, with my driving skills, I wouldn't be able to get the best out of it anyway, where I'd really get to the greatness of the car. Whereas the P1, because it does require a little bit of input, you can drive it at its quick speeds, but without going completely bonkers. And because you still have to work with it, it gives you that interaction. It gives you the feedback that just makes it all worthwhile. For me, there is absolutely no choice. You know what you've got to go out and buy.